Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Holl, and a quick programming note. GABF is coming up soon, and if you plan to be in Colorado, here's a way to make your Great American Beer Festival experience even greater. Check out the Denver Rare Beer Tasting on October 10th. It's an incredible afternoon of beer passion featuring an all-star list of craft breweries pouring amazing brews to benefit Pints for Prostates. This is a bucket list experience for a great cause. You'll get to try beers you won't find elsewhere and meet the men and women who brewed them. For more information about the Denver Rare Beer Tasting, visit pintsforprostates.org. On a recent episode, I was talking with Adrian Tierney-Jones about his UK pub book, and it had me thinking about cask ale, and I mean real cask ale. And it turns out that we're right now in the middle of Cask Ale Week. So I've asked Georgina Young of St. Austell Brewery to join me to talk about the history and tradition of cask, what goes into making it well, and how proper care and service matters. First, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There, you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and other podcasts. Listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. You can also follow All About Beer on Instagram, Threads, X, and Facebook at All About Beer. And to keep up with all of the smoked beer news and releases, make sure you check out This Week in Rauch Beer by searching the group on Facebook or follow at TW Rauch Beer on X, Threads, and Instagram. Glassware and apparel is available on allaboutbeer.com/merch. This show and all of the work we do, it's supported by you. Please go visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer. A few dollars goes a long way to help fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising and supporting All About Beer, please email us at info@allaboutbeer.com. So like I said a minute ago, it turns out that this is Cask Ale Week in the UK. So I'm delighted to be speaking with one of the finest cask ale brewers in the country, Georgina Young, the brewing director of St. Austell's Brewing. She joined the company as head brewer at Bath Ales in May of 2019 before being promoted to brewing director in July of 2020. According to her bio, she was recruited to the brewery by her longtime friend, Roger Ryman, who served as St. Austell Brewing director for 2 decades. And she was the perfect candidate to take up the reins following his untimely passing in May of 2020. Respected across the industry, she continues an impressive career glittered with achievements. She began her brewing career at Smiles Brewery in Bristol after graduating from university with a Master's of Science in Brewing and Distilling. She went on to run the pilot brewery at Camden Bry for 6 years before joining Fuller's as a production brewer in 1999, where she served in roles across all aspects of production. She completed the IBD Master Brewer in 2016 before ascending to the role of head brewer in 2017. Cask ale is clearly a passion, and you're likely to finish this episode as thirsty as I was for a proper pint. Here's our conversation. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And it's Cask Ale Week happening, and I guess we're towards the closing end of the week. And I'm sure that there's other folks who would argue that every week should be Cask Ale Week, but then we couldn't put the focus on it. So with the holiday, with the initiative in mind, I'm curious from your perspective as to what the state of cask ale, at least in the UK, is right now.
Well, considering cask ale is what we are famous for in the UK because of our climate, because of our pubs. Actually, since COVID, cask has had a pretty tough time coming back since then. And the more focus that we can do as brewers and pub companies together with, some trade bodies as well, like CAMRA and Caskmark, really get behind cask is really important because actually it's having a tough time at the moment. And actually there's a lot still, to celebrate with cask beer because it is the most natural form of beer that there is to taste and to make, and it's it's our national drink, so we should be really shouting about it. And that's the sort of the purpose of Cask Ale Week. But we've seen some big brewers coming out of Cask, are really dumbing down recently, which doesn't help, because,
When you say dumbing down, what do you mean by that?
well, I think, we've had Carlsberg take over Marston's recently, and there is a worry that there's less focus on cask beer from those guys.
Okay.
Um, and it's, the mantle then falls to the sort of smaller regionals, family-owned brewers to keep flying the flag. Um, as well as the SEBA and the small brewers, the Small Independent Brewers Association, um, are also doing a fantastic job with Cask. But the thing with Cask is about how it's served, and that's where this sort of interaction with the retailer becomes quite hard.
So I want to talk about the service in a minute, but when you're talking about it coming out of COVID, um, in sort of a dinged up shape, um, is it just fewer people at the pub? Is it people have moved on to other things? Like what from your perch, like where do you see the disconnect these
Yeah,
days?
it's fewer people at the pub. It's really as simple as that. Here in the UK, there was on the news today 50 pubs a month closing in the UK. And just because of the economic conditions that we're in at the moment, and that's tough, especially if you're running a business and a pub. So that means there are less outlets for us to serve our beer in, and I think a lot of the big pub chains that we have here in the UK, they might have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pubs, some of these guys. They might only then stock one cask beer or two, whereas traditionally they might have had three or four. So
Yeah.
it's a competitive marketplace. And that makes it tough for the beer, but it's, don't get me wrong, it's not all doom and gloom because there are some brilliant breweries, including ourselves, still pioneering with cask and really maintaining quality and ensuring that there is good choice for the consumer if you know where to get it.
So, all right. So let's start to unpack that a little bit of the difference between, and I'll just use the words good and bad. Although I know that there's a lot of shades, but proper cask versus run of the mill, maybe
Mhm.
if I don't want to be super rude about it. So where does the difference begin?
So proper cask beer is obviously made from your malted barley, which I would have thought every brewer in the UK, I'd be surprised if they're not, is not using uh, barley grown in this country, whether that's from, the south down here in Cornwall or the south coast along Dorset and Hampshire or the east of the country, whether that's East Anglia, Norfolk, Suffolk, and even further up in Northumberland, we will be using barley that is grown here locally in our country and then malted to the specification that we need for brewers. So traditionally, UK brewers have mash tuns. So we need a well modified barley that has a low nitrogen content and has high starch content. And so that will be grown and malted to that specification. Even the very wet spring and summer we've had, actually the barley has come out not too bad
Oh, okay.
this year, which is really good news actually.
Yeah.
Which but malting is a very energy intensive process. So hopefully again energy prices will be also on our side as well, coming down a little bit. So to help that help our pockets and our purse strings. So all of that is great, and that's looking really good this year. Great malting barley, better price, enabling us to make our cask beer. So whether that will then obviously have a proportion of roasted malts in it, chocolate, ambers, Caragolds, crystal malts, that whole array of roasted malts to give us the huge a range of cask beers, milds, extra special bitters, ambers, what golden ales, whatever genre of cask beer that the brewers are making, that should all be really great, and is still available to be great if we're doing it the right way. Brewing is a batch process. A brewer's job is to take that barley every year, follow how it's malted, adjust the mill, adjust the mashing temperatures, and tweaks within the process to ensure that they're making batch after batch as consistently as possible. So to me, it's a bit of full automation. If your brewers are not focused on the whole process or see it the whole way through, then that can present challenges. So it's really, great cask beer is probably made, not probably, it is made in the smaller breweries, because there is that care and attention, that's understanding all the way through the process how that malting barley will react. Again, some people might get their hops from the UK, or they might get them wider afield, West Coast of America. Hop harvest is in full swing at the
Oh,
moment.
absolutely.
So all those combinations coming together, but it's after the fermentation where cask is really important, because actually, are you leaving fermentable sugars at the end of fermentation, and a yeast count of typically 1 million to between 1 and 2 million, to ensure that you need your yeast for the secondary fermentation, and you need something for it to ferment. Either that's residual sugars from the fermentation, or brewers will be priming as they go into a racking tank, or before they might rack by hand direct from the fermenter. So, you can see how artisan cask is, and there's no processing really taking place in cask beer. You're not filtering it, you're not injecting it with carbon dioxide or nitrogen or anything like that. So I really feel it's those artisan regional brewers, smaller brewers, who are making, as you said, the proper cask beer. So
Has there been a loss of focus among brewers about handing down some of these traditions or thinking about them long term?
I think a majority of brewers will also be making a lager, a range of IPAs, session IPA, a dipper, a New England, there's all that going on as well. So yeah, maybe that's what the issue is, John, not handing this skill and this art and craft on, versus the, actually everyone trying to make other beers as well. I'd probably really have to think hard of a cask only brewer. One's not tripping off my tongue at the moment. I even know within our own business, we have seen cask peak, but our volumes have continued to grow, because we are also focusing on our lager and our bottled beers and our canned beers. So
Do you remember your introduction to cask, be it as a drinker or as a young brewer?
I do. I mean, it was, my parents are teachers, and my dad would have gone to the pub once a week. And I remember clearly on a Sunday, we'd sit outside the pub and we'd wait while he'd have his pint of beer. I remember I was a bit older, being allowed to taste some of that beer. And, so there is that generational piece. Again, I was listening to a podcast only this morning, and someone said, well, if your dad did it, then that's not cool. The issue was they were talking about their dad in 2006. Now,
Ah,
I'm talking about, 1996, if not before. So, um, um, so there is that generational thing. There's also in this country, milds and beers like that, low alcohol, sort of 3.4%, 3.6%, sweet. They were your meal, once you've done a hard day's work, whether it's down the mine or in the pit, or, wherever, so those industries aren't there anymore. So that need, as much as we all love milds, and it's definitely a style that's having a bit of a resurgence, the volumes aren't there.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, it really is the big brewers who are not making, you know, Bass doesn't exist anymore. Scottish and Newcastle aren't around. So in this country, we've lost the big brewers, who were, making lots of cask beer. So
And being advocates for it as well.
yeah, and had the advertising budgets for it. So,
Sure.
and you have to be clever. In smaller company, some companies won't even have advertising budgets, or put any money on social. So it's very you have to be quite clever with how you shout about cask, if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
also like the focus of the beer, because of course, if you're making more money out of your tub of IPA, keg IPA, then because that's what the retailer wants, because the retailer can command a higher price for slightly hazy IPA, then that's what the retailer wants. And of course, the best place to get cask beer is obviously in the tap rooms or of the smaller breweries, or if you have a managed or tenanted estate. And again, we're very lucky to have that at St Austell, with 180 pubs. So that's a great outlet for our cask beer, and you will have that beer served in the best way because we can control that.
Yeah. When you first started brewing and were introduced to brewing proper cask,
Mm-hmm.
what were some of those early lessons or experiences that helped form your professional career to where it is now?
I think my first brewing job was in a very small manual hands-on brewery. And you knew if you had made a mistake. It was so obvious in the way that the beer tasted if you hadn't emptied a malt sack, or you hadn't been quite accurate with your hydrometer reading when you were doing the fermentations. It was very clear to see how these mistakes can be made, and times and temperatures were critical. um and the majority of my working brewing career has been at Fuller's in London. So it was great. Again, still quite hands-on from the respect of, adding the crystal malt um and the hops. It was all weighed out by hand, and the buckets added and things like that, despite the sophistication of the software and the brew house. So it was very much learning that quality and consistency is really, really important, and repeatability to ensure that batch after batch, or you've got that consistency. And yeah, measuring the fermentation control. Um, every 4 hours, you're taking a gravity sample. You need to be controlling the rate of that fermentation so you can be specific as possible to ensure that your yeast is behaving in the right way.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just that attention to detail. And I think just making sure, I find now my responsibility is looking at the teams, checking that the data is still there and we're not wavering on a track, that we've got trend analysis, and that the beers are staying as consistent as possible.
How fickle is cask ale?
Well, fickle as in each the batch of it.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, or just is can I know consistency is important, and I know that the process is important.
Mhm.
And I guess when I mean fickle, when I think of everything that you just said about the brewing process, and then making sure that it gets to the pub in the right condition, and then is managed in the right condition, and then served in the right condition. It's not it does seem like there are so many different variables where something could get mucked up along the line.
Absolutely. And I think you're right with that word fickle because it can be very fickle because there are so many steps to the process. Because if you start dissing its cousin, like, well, actually, it's all going to be filtered or centrifuged, or we're just going to add so many hops and just leave it hazy, you can get away with anything. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Absolutely get away with anything. But with cask beer, everything's on show. You know, it's like running down a beach naked, isn't it? You can see absolutely everything of what's that beer is about, and it's really important to the process that is that one has in the brewery and within the supply chain and at the point of dispense, because it can lead to variations. Now, cask beer probably is more characterful than any other type of beer because you can have that batch to batch variation, but you don't want that variation to be because it's been cooked as it's been going on a lorry. I don't mean literally cooked like it's
Right.
because it's not pasteurized, but it's warmed or if the chiller isn't working in the cellar, you can start getting papery, and the beer will oxidize even though you've got yeast in there mopping it all up and going through that secondary fermentation. And if the lines aren't clean, you very quickly can get, acetic notes and vinegary notes coming through just because the lines haven't been cleaned. And it's you know, I'm not talking about that. Those are not positive characteristics you want on cars.
No.
But the fact that you might have a slight variation in the present gravity, because for whatever reason that secondary fermentation hasn't taken place to the same extent each time, is what gives that beer character. And but that's a positive, I think, in cask beer. So, uh, but it is about having process and control throughout the whole supply chain.
And then what about service as well? I know Caskmark puts a lot of effort into making sure that the pubs that carry that insignia are doing everything the
Mhm.
right way. But there are a lot of places that serve cask that don't have that distinction outside their door. Um, where from your brewer mind does service come into play and presentation?
Yes, service and presentation is absolutely huge because it can ruin all that hard work that we've done as brewers. Um, and I think this is where the skill of the cellar person is absolutely critical. So we will have our own internal master cellarman scheme, where we will be training all our pub managers to a really high standard. Castmark do part of this as part of their scores on the cellar doors and their beer mark accreditation. Your cellar is completely assessed. Um, but you can't just do it for the assessment. You have to do it continuously to ensure that your good stock rotation, lines are cleaned, temperature is good, and it's also glassware. Glassware is absolutely a huge turn off for beer drinkers. If it hasn't been washed properly, served at the wrong temperature, um, if your glass washer, the chemicals you use in your glass washer to make sure that it's been cleaned properly, if you have a cask or any beer and you see bubbles on the inside of your glass and you know
Oh
that your
yeah.
glass isn't clean. So that whole point of working with a retailer is absolutely critical to ensure that cask beer is served at its best. And I think this is where, unfortunately, a lot of the pub chains and big beer producers have created their own dispense systems. So actually, you just need to go down to the cellar and just press the green button if your keg is empty. And by teaching people this, they're not then learning that actually you need to vent your cask beer. You need to put it to bed at night to keep the CO2 in. And it's really diluted that skill, which is, I think, terribly sad and also not helping cask beer.
No.
But you'll also have people in a pub who couldn't tell you what cask beer is. They might be pouring one. I'm sounding very negative, and I really don't like this, but these are the challenges that we've got for cask beer, and this is why shouting about it the whole time and always putting it at the top of the agenda is what, we're trying to do as brewers, and to show people how amazing it is.
Is is there innovation in the space? And I say this somewhat reluctantly because U.S. brewers have messed around with cask. Um, they've messed around with various styles over here over the last couple of years. But when you're mentioning golden or ESB or mild or the very traditional styles that I think of when I think of cask ale, um, is there innovation to be made in the space, or
Yeah,
is the charm the
I think
history?
sorry. I think
No, no,
I
no.
think, we obviously make a lot of tribute, we make a lot of proper job, a lot of hicks, a lot of gem, um, and but we also have a cask club. So my brewers will be making those core beers, day in, day out, week after week, and their job is to keep them as consistent as possible. But I'm also very conscious that brewers are very creative people, like chefs, and they want to make other things and they want to innovate. So we have this cask club program where every brewer can make their own beer throughout the year. We make a different beer a week, and I really don't get involved unless I unless I want to make one with developing their own styles of beer. And really what we're doing that cask club program is looking out for the next big thing. And so we make 10 barrels, so that's 40 tubs, 40 firkins that comes out of that. And each we have 40 pubs that are a member of this club, and they get one of these beers a week to serve. They put them on a Friday night and they're gone by a Sunday. And the guys do innovate. We've had some things that might not work, like a Hefeweizen, or if someone's really trying to do a hazy IPA on cask, it's challenging because that kind of innovation, it's not what people expect. And unless your bar staff is saying, well, actually, this is a wheat beer and it should really taste this, but actually it hasn't got the carbonation because it's a cask beer. It's quite challenging. But they've done some great things during that program, making all sorts of different things, and who knows, we might find the next big um um style of cask coming out of there. So, it's not, sours, for example, don't work particularly well in cask because
Right.
you haven't got that carbonation to lift it. Um,
Has there
so
been anything that surprised you? Like I understand sours and Hefeweizen would be
mhm.
that'd be a challenge. Was there anything that came out of this program that
Some
surprised
things,
and delighted?
some things do, but I'm trying to just get some up actually, because they actually they get to design their names as well. So they might call it ripple effect. I think that had raspberries in it, which was really cool. There was cookies and cream when we're for Wimbledon week. And that worked really well actually. Um, I'm trying to see, I'll give you some examples of things we've done this week. We did something called Sovin So Good. So that was using a lot of Nelson Sauvin in there. It's things that really surprised me. We had one brew that was actually created using AI. Just literally putting into Chat GTP. What
Oh
do they think
goodness.
beer recipe would come up with? I think we'll be all right. They're humans. I think we'll stick with that. So yeah, there've been all sorts of different ingredients going in. Sometimes it's,
Okay.
pine extract, and
Okay.
it's just again giving them the opportunity to use different combinations and things like that.
Um, Interesting. So when you have weeks like this, cask weeks like this, and you're out there shouting and you're trying to get the everyday pub goers or the regular pub goers to remember the beauty of cask and to appreciate it. I've been thinking a lot. So I'm headed to London next month, and I'm only going to be there for a few days. But as somebody who likes to drink beer, I'm planning on pretty much only drinking cask ale when I'm there from the proper pubs that I know.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm wondering how much the tourist element plays into the work that you all do, because when I think people from outside of the UK think about pubs, we think about cask ale.
Mhm.
That's the image that's in our mind. Hand pulled and um, uh, proper pints. And I'm just sort of curious as to in your mind where the role of the tourist plays in either the survival of, the continuation of, the respect for cask ale, or if we even rank. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is really, the tourist is really important. But again, it's about getting to those right pubs, isn't it? And I can think of a few pubs in London where, you know, uh, people will go and companies will use event come to this pub in the corner of Trafalgar Square but sometimes it's about getting off the beaten track and just finding those little gems of pubs, and you might find in a good beer guide or through word of mouth as well. And maybe even trying to get to some smaller tap rooms, and just a little bit off the beaten track, because I think you'll find that there's some really good cask beer at the breweries in the tap rooms
Oh
in
yeah.
London as well. And actually I think we're seeing more brewers um putting on cask again, because we've all had quite a lot of IPA, haven't we, over the last 10, 15 years. And actually, um,
Last
it's
15
sometimes,
days, yeah.
yeah, coming back to our roots of, oh, that's our alarm, sorry. Um,
All good. We can't hear anything on this end, so.
oh, can't you? Okay. Um, and I do think ambers and best bidders really are, you're seeing more of them around at the moment in the UK. Be interesting to see if you see that next week, you know. And I'm not talking just the London Pride, Timothy Taylor's, it's, you know, I'll put Gem and Spitfire in there as well.
Okay.
There's definitely the smaller guys trying, their hand at cask and making these more traditional styles at the moment, which is great.
I like to hear that. Um, so Cask Week will soon be behind us.
Hmm.
Um, what is the what's the hope? What's the assignment for folks once this particular week ends?
Well, I think even for us, Cask Ale Week again has been coordinated by Caskmark. And I think, even for us in St Austell, it's given us a great focus to talk about cask a lot more. We also had the wonderful opportunity that the beer that put us on the map is Tribute, and that was created in 1999. So that beer is 25 years old this year. So we had a birthday party on Friday for Tribute, which was great fun. Um, and I think, after Cask Ale Week, it's just about trying to keep the focus on and keep it in the front of people's minds again, um, because it's such a niche product now, and I think I think a rebirth, if you like, of camera, when actually all you can get out, and the pubs is fizzy, hazy IPAs, session
Hmm.
IPAs at the moment. This is what people will turn to, because I think, the flavors that are in those beers, and the fact that, it has that natural carbonation. So actually it's not so filling, it's not so gassy, make it more pleasurable to drink. So let's hope, Cask Ale Week happened every year, and I think every year it's gaining more and more momentum. So
I love hearing that. Um, I love hearing that. So before I let you go, I've been asking this question on the show for a while now. We call it the Green Door question. And there's a television show that I was watching during the pandemic called The Good Place. And in the final season of the show, they introduce a concept known as the Green Door.
Mhm.
And the characters can walk through the door and be anywhere doing whatever they want. And so it got me thinking that if we had a green door on our plane of existence and this conversation ended and you could walk through it and be at any pub or any brewery anywhere in the world, where would you want to go? Who would you want to be with? And what would you like to be drinking?
Hmm. I would like to be going through that door into a pub with an open fire, probably a stone floor, wooden chairs, oak beams, four, probably no more than four hand pumps on, because that's also a good sign of good quality beer. And that's a really tough one, John. Which beer? Because I made London Pride for 15 years, and now I'm making Tribute and Proper Job for 5. So if can I have both of? I'll have all three of those on plus
This this
ESB.
is this is this is your this is your perfect scenario. You can
Yeah,
have whatever you want.
yeah. So I'll have Pride, ESB, Tribute and Proper Job, please. And because I love those beers. I know that's not. We'll have a few Belgian beers in the fridge, of course, as well. Um, just to finish the night off. And I think I probably owe it to my family to have my family there because I don't see much of them. Whether they'd
I
come or not is completely beside the point. Is who knows? But I'd like
right.
that.
Um, well, lovely. I hope you can make that happen sooner rather than later.
I
But
think I probably can.
lovely. Well, thank you for doing this. Thanks for being on the show this week. Thanks for sharing insight and the passion. Thanks for doing what you're doing to keep Cask alive because we need it. So
Me too.
thank you.
Cool.
What's a cask ale experience you've had and remember fondly? Tell me about it. Questions, comments, guest suggestions, you can do all of that by emailing me. It's John Holl. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. A reminder, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and read great new content, as well as the archives going back to 1979. You can also follow All About Beer on social media at All About Beer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And don't forget to check out probrewer.com each week for original articles from the All About Beer team. As for this show, Nate Weber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Holl. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.